Sorry. Is there a chance I can do a quick test? Just to make sure I've got levels. Can you play something for me? You've got something you can play. Okay. No, I'm not getting anything from you. Okay. So that phone, is that coming through this?
You need to choose another microphone.
Is the sound coming from this?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
I don't maybe.
Are you playing the sound from this?
Now the microphone.
No. See, your sound output should be coming to me first.
Oh, okay.
Is there anything on your laptop that you can play a sound from? A video or a piece of music?
Slide video.
Yep.
Where the sound comes.
If you do that, then I can test the sound.
What I need to do?
Can you play a video or a piece of music, something from your laptop that I can test to make sure that the sound works? Does that make sense? Sorry, I'm being... Does that come through this? Is the sound coming from this? All I'm getting is just a buzz from your laptop. Are you still playing? Something from your laptop that I can test to make sure that the sound works. Does that make sense?
Inside microphone.
That works. It's fine. Did you hear it coming out of the PA? Let me play it again. You can listen.
Oh, вроде да. Он такой.
Помехами?
Ну, сейчас он просто включит.
Okay. So that's all working from the laptop. When do you want the sound from?
And I need to listen when you say.
Sorry? When do you want the sound back on? When do you want the sound from the laptop?
It's an live stream, and we should have good broadcast.
So you don't want to play it anymore?
No, we don't want to play. No. Just the good sound.
Good sound. We want
If
to
it
have
is not possible.
good sound. What good? Oh, I see. It's an internet.
Okay. What I'll do is remove this. And use normal.
Dear guests, thank you for coming. Thank you for your attention. My name is Nadezhda Novoselova. I represent Factor GMO project, and I'm a public relations manager. And if you have any questions, you can ask me it when we finish our event. And now I want to announce the launch of our press conference and give the first word to Director of National Association for Genetic Safety from Russia, Moscow, the initiator of the project Factor GMO.
Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья! Я очень рада всех сегодня приветствовать. Для меня лично это особый день, потому что идея этого эксперимента возникла в ОГБ, Общенациональной ассоциации генетической безопасности, в 2006 году. И с 2006 года мы ведем работу над тем, чтобы этот эксперимент состоялся. Наша ассоциация существует с 2004 года, и уже в первые годы ее существования стало совершенно очевидно, что существуют два научных лагеря, что существуют разные политические мнения, что в конце концов общество разделилось, кто-то за ГМО и кто-то против ГМО. И совершенно очевидно, что для того, чтобы, если не примирить эти два лагеря, но во всяком случае найти ответ, найти правду, найти истину, необходимо сделать эксперимент, которому могли бы доверять как одна сторона, так и другая. И для того, чтобы такой эксперимент состоялся, необходимо обеспечить его совершенно независимой группой ученых. Организация этого процесса заняла у нас много лет. И я рада сказать, что сегодня мы находимся в прекрасном состоянии. Мы на старте. На самом деле подготовительная часть эксперимента проходит уже какое-то время, и сейчас это как раз тот торжественный день, когда я могу сказать, как когда-то сказал Юрий Гагарин, когда отправился в космос, я могу сказать: поехали. И могу передать слово представителю наблюдательного совета эксперимента Оксане Дмитриевне. Она сейчас расскажет более подробно об эксперименте, потому что, собственно говоря, роль нашей ассоциации организационная. Мы не имеем никакого отношения к планированию эксперимента, поэтому основные вопросы, которые вы захотите задать, вы сможете задать их нашему ученому наблюдательному совету. Оксана Дмитриевна.
Спасибо, Елена. Здравствуйте, уважаемые коллеги. Для меня большая честь принимать участие в наблюдательном совете такого, в общем, амбициозного и полномасштабного проекта, как «Фактор ГМО». Что я хотела бы немножко себя представить. Я являюсь заместителем директора по научной работе одного из старейших в России институтов в области гигиены окружающей среды, а именно исследовательский институт экологии человека и гигиены окружающей среды имени Сысина. И практически все нормативные требования в России в этой области, законодательно закрепленные, были разработаны и обоснованы в нашем институте. И сфера моих научных интересов тесно связана непосредственно с профилактической токсикологией, то есть с установлением безопасных уровней воздействия химических веществ, а также оценкой риска для здоровья. Кроме того, я хотела бы сказать, что на протяжении 7 лет я являлась экспертом ВОЗ по международной программе химической безопасности. То есть вы видите, что я всегда моя работа была связана с химическими веществами, но не с геномодифицированными продуктами и организмами. Что касается планируемого проекта, я хотела бы сказать, что фактор ГМО, основная его задача ответить на вопрос, действительно ли ГМО и связанные с ним пестициды являются безопасными для здоровья человека. И надо отметить, что до настоящего времени в мире не было проведено научного исследования, которое было бы достаточно всеобъемлющим чтобы дать четкий ответ на вопрос о безопасности для здоровья каких-либо ГМО. И, как уже сказала Елена, подготовительная часть исследований была начата еще летом 2013 года, а экспериментальная часть будет запущена в 2015 году и продлится 2-3 года. Промежуточные результаты исследования будут регулярно публиковаться в печати. Исследование будет проводиться на устойчивую гербициду ГМ-кукурузы с реальным уровнем содержания гербицида глифосата, с применением которого она и выращивается. Эксперимент пройдет на территории Российской Федерации и Западной Европы, в местах, данное расположение которых не подлежат огласке, поскольку любое вмешательство в проведение эксперимента, в ежедневное проведение эксперимента может оказать влияние на последующие результаты. Лабораторные животные будут получать корм, содержащий определенное количество генетически модифицированных продуктов и пестицидов в соответствии с протоколом. Масштаб проекта, его строгость и диапазон эффектов, оцениваемых одновременно, соответствуют и превосходят современные международные стандарты, применяемые для тестирования токсичности геномодифицированных продуктов, пищевых добавок и химических веществ в целом. 3 основных направления – токсикологическое, канцерогенное и мультигенерационное – позволят ответить на следующие вопросы. Является ли геномодифицированная пища и связанные с ней пестицидами токсичными для различных систем организма? И могут ли они вызывать онкологические заболевания, сокращать репродуктивную способность или вызывать врожденные эффекты? При этом я хочу подчеркнуть, что влияние на репродуктивную функцию будет изучаться не в 5 поколениях животных, как это рекомендуется OECD, не в 2, простите, поколениях, а в 5 поколениях. И последний вопрос, на который мы хотели бы получить ответ, это является ли смесь химических веществ, входящих в состав раундапа, более или менее токсичной, чем активный ингредиент раундапа глифосат. В заключение я хотела бы сказать, что фактор ГМО – это пример исследования, которое должно было бы быть запущено до того, проведено до того, как ГМО-продукты и связанные с ним пестициды были выпущены в окружающую среду. Благодарю за внимание.
So, good afternoon. My name is Bruce Blumberg. I'm a professor at the University of California at Irvine. So my expertise is in developmental biology and in what we call molecular endocrinology, that is how hormone receptors work. So my particular expertise is in endocrine disruption, and that's what attracted me to be a member of this panel, because we in the endocrine disruptor community are frustrated by the types of guideline studies that are done under OECD guidelines that don't capture endocrine disrupting endpoints. So my role on this panel is to help make sure that the Factor GMO studies capture endocrine disruptor endpoints, and also what we call transgenerational endpoints. So if we treat pregnant rats, we call the F0 generation, can we follow those results over the many generations to come? I think that has very important implications for human health, and it's not something that's currently done beyond, as you heard, the F2 generation, so that would be your grandchildren. I and other researchers have shown that endocrine disrupting chemicals can have effects in the F3 and F4 generation, your great-grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren. So this is very important to know whether these chemicals and these genetically modified organisms can have effects that are seen in those generations. You heard that this study exceeds standards, and I'd like to emphasize that. This is essentially an OECD guideline study plus. So we've added many things beyond that, and we hope that this will be the definitive study that will establish whether or not these chemicals and these GMO products are safe and effective. Thank you.
So thank you very much for being here. It is an honor to me to be here in London to participate to this huge integrated project, which will allow to us to have finally the truth about GMOs. I am not an expert in GMO, but I represent here the independency of science. As you know, our laboratory in Italy, the Ramazzini Institute, is well known all over in the world for the importance of the studies we performed in the past, starting in the 70s with the vinylchloride study, and then we performed studies on benzene, on formaldehyde, on MTB, on aspartame, and apart the last one, all the other cases were unfortunately confirmed for the carcinogenicity of the compound in the human population. So our studies were also predictive, but they could be predictive because we started and planned the studies reproducing a human equivalent model. What means that we observed what happened in a live body when the exposure starts during prenatal life and the individuals are observed until spontaneous death. This is what happened to the human population. Why? To create artificial model where the different endpoints are not captured. So this independency in modeling, in performing, and in communicating the results of our study allow me to be in this board and to state that we worked for more than 1 year to plan this experiment and to start to have some observation in order to have all what is needed for a realistic risk assessment. I don't know whether or not GMOs could be safe or could have some harmful content. But anyway, to understand, to know that we need to replicate the human situation, which means toxicity, carcinogenicity in a long-term experiment, and multi-generational studies with different windows of susceptibility studied and looked for possible different answer to the compound in different periods of the life. This regard the study, and as I said, I am very proud to be involved in the evaluation of that. But what is really very important is the international, global impact of this study, which is funded independently, as it is independent, the Ramazzini Institute. You know that we are a social cooperative with more than 25,000 fellows, associates, which perform fundraising all the year in order to fund our studies. And the same is happening now for this huge study. And the international impact of the results will be of favor for all the human population globally. This because the choice is very, very close. We in Europe have to decide what we will do. But to do something without scientific basis is not the correct way to do that. We did with asbestos, we did with benzene, we did with the oxygenated additives, and now we are there to try to repair all the damage that we have done. So we don't want to do that. We would like to apply a preventive strategy, and this is just primary prevention. What should be done by institutional entity, by industry, but that will be done by citizens. Thank you very much.
Дорогие друзья, это небольшое вступительное слово, которое мы хотели сказать. Сейчас у нас есть прекрасная возможность задать вопросы. Кто начнет? Надежда вам передаст микрофон. У меня большая просьба, представляйтесь, пожалуйста.
John Vidal from the Guardian newspaper here in London. Could you confirm that you are going to use the Monsanto names? And also, can you give me a bit more information about why you're being so secret about the money, where it's coming from Monsanto? Why can you not tell us now where your money is coming from?
Если позволите, мы разделим вопросы на две части. Я могу отвечать только за ту часть, которую координирую и которая является моей ответственностью. Это в первую очередь обеспечение независимых источников финансирования. Все дело в том, что мы сейчас как раз находимся в режиме фандрайзинга. Мы получили определенную часть денег для эксперимента, но все источники финансирования будут указаны, как только мы соберем все 25 миллионов. Все источники эксперимента будут указаны, будут абсолютно открыты. Безусловно, сейчас мы этого не будем говорить, но это наша политика такая, мы считаем, что она правильная, поэтому вы узнаете всю информацию, которую хотите знать абсолютно. Мы ничего не будем скрывать.
I have to come back to this. What happens if you don't get the $25 million? Someone never knows.
Вы знаете, я уверена, что мы соберем 25 миллионов, потому что я верю и в здравый смысл, и я верю в то, что человечество обязательно объединится для того, чтобы решать современные вызовы. И если, к сожалению, сегодня технология ГМО вызывает так много споров, и мы должны, для того, чтобы эти споры прекратились между всеми нами, постараться прийти к единому ответу. Поэтому я думаю, что все человечество имеет возможность повлиять на эксперимент. Можно отправить $1, можно отправить $10, можно отправить $1 миллион, если вы миллионер. Но я уверена, что эти деньги будут собраны. Вся информация о том, как помочь, она будет у нас на сайте. И я, честно говоря, считаю, что все мы должны взять пример у наших ученых, которые объединились. Ученые, которые будут проводить этот эксперимент, представляют самые разные страны. И момент того, что сегодня ученые объединяются для того, чтобы работать плечо о плечо, рука об руку, это очень хороший пример. Поэтому я уверена, что все мы возьмем пример у наших ученых. У нас есть еще один чат.
Sorry, could you just confirm the Monsanto directive?
Семена, они действительно, и те семена, которые разработала компания Monsanto, и это, ну, скажем так, те семена, споры о которых сейчас как раз проходят.
I'm Jeffrey Lee of the Telegraph. My question is much on the same line, so let me just try to press you a bit further. How much of the $25 million have you raised so far? And can you give us some more detail about this experiment? All we've learned so far is that rats are involved, which is a relief, so I was wondering what species might be used. But, we have this Monsanto corn. Can we have the variety of Monsanto corn used? Do we know how many rats? Can we get some idea of the design of the experiment? Because otherwise we have no way of evaluating whether this is a genuine thing or not.
Мне кажется, это абсолютно детально, но более подробно вам сейчас ответят коллеги. Я не буду называть процент, потому что, если позволите, я тогда задам вам встречный вопрос. А почему вам так важно знать, какое количество денег вы сейчас набрали? Как вы считаете, что это может изменить?
Because you want to know whether you're a genuine operation or a public relations exercise. That's our job.
Уточните вопрос, я не совсем понимаю.
Look, well, this is a free, nasty, difficult press you're dealing with. We probe things to try to find out whether they're genuine or not. We do not take as read something that is said from the platform as necessarily being the truth. So we need to find out how genuine you are. So that's why it would be nice to know, A, how you're getting on with the funding, and B, some detail on what this experiment is going to be. We have all these wonderful adjectives, but no detail.
То, что сейчас происходит, это безусловно пиар. Это пиар нашего эксперимента. Общественные отношения предполагают как раз абсолютную открытость коммуникации с обществом, с журналистами, с экспертами, с политиками. И это главная функция этой пресс-конференции. Вы абсолютно правы, вы должны залезть к нам под кожу, поэтому я сейчас предоставляю возможность нашим ученым ответить на эти вопросы. Мне кажется, что мы очень много раскрыли деталей, но если это не так, давайте вместе для этого работать.
Okay, so the study has, as far as I understand it, 3 arms. So there will be a carcinogenesis arm, there will be a toxicity arm, and there will be a multi-generational arm. It's my understanding that the studies will exceed the current OECD guidelines in terms of the length of time for which the animals are evaluated, so that we can draw parallels with humans. So as you probably know, cancer is not a disease that you have an exposure today and you have a disease tomorrow. Cancer is a disease that takes many years to develop. So you need to look at the model species, the rats, for a sufficient time that the cancer can be detected. The same with the toxicity study. There needs to be a sufficient number of animals. So I'm certain that you're aware of various studies that have been done. They've been criticized, not enough animals, various things.
That's why I asked how many animals we're using.
Right, that's a detail. So there will be sufficient animals. The number of animals will exceed the OECD guidelines.
I need to go to evaluate is it a serious exercise or not. And you just identified animals as being, number of animals as being part of it.
Yes.
Sufficient doesn't help me. What I need to know is roughly what they're doing. Otherwise, what credibility do you have?
There was a reference to 6,000 rats at one point. Is that still standing?
So I don't myself know the exact number, but the OECD guidelines call for a certain number of animals to be used for each endpoint of each sex, right? So the guidelines determine the number of animals that will be ultimately used, and then we need, because we're looking at more endpoints, there will need to be more animals. The reason it's probably a good idea not to say the numbers, there will be someone who will say, you're killing 10,000 animals, and that's a terrible thing. So, you know, the exact number is not important.
I have a piece of paper which says 6,000 animals. So.
I didn't write that. It could be 6, it could be 12. I personally don't know the number.
The credibility does rather diminish when you can't give us detail.
Can't hear. Please use your microphone.
It says the credibility is diminished when we can't provide sufficient details.
Hi, Pete Farron, freelance journalist and representing Spiegel. You say you're exceeding OECD. As we know, that the OECD generally standards don't go far enough. Are you working with OECD to redefine standards? And that's question one. Question two, if you're using, obviously, using glyphosate, you're not going to have a problem getting the sort of standards and the toxicity information from Monsanto to carry out the experiments all the way.
Do you want my answer? No, I would like partly to answer also to Mr. I don't remember, to you. So, about the number of animals. The exercise that I applied initially to this question was to count how many animals were used in the past to reach all the uncertainties we have today. So I think that we have wasted a lot of animals and money just to have nutritional information, but not really adequate information about toxicology. So the number of animals should be discussed always, and the experiment should not be replicated when there is some value in what is already published. So the number of animals that we will use will respect the last OECD and EFSA guideline regarding novel food, which is the case, and will be about 100 animals for each sex and each group for the carcinogenicity study, both for glyphosate and Roundup and for the GMOs. So what is very interesting is that we have a biostatistician evaluating the study, which would suggest us how many animals we have to use in order to have not weakness in the biostatistic evaluation. And at least the animal will be thousands of animals, as were thousands of animals used for having no toxicologic heavy data. So the other question you posed more or less is the same. OECD guideline ask for certain kind of experiment, for certain endpoints, and we will use these guidelines basically. But there is a but, and the National Toxicology Program in the United States already accepted our but. That is that prenatal exposure could affect strongly the results, because in this case we have the exposure of mother during pregnancy through food, and because we have chronic disease, degenerative disease, which appear in the last part of the life, we apply the OECD guideline. But we think that for a good carcinogenetic study, we have to start in the prenatal life and observe animals at least 130 weeks, which means 75 years in humans. The OECD guideline asks to kill animals about when they are 104 weeks of age, which means about 55, 60 years in human. And you understand well with this comparison that there is no chance to take an observation about the real carcinogenicity of a compound. We demonstrate that in multiple cases. We duplicated the study of the National Toxicology Program, for example, about xylilins, which is an aromatic solvent very used. They were negative in the results with the same animals, same kind of exposure, and we had positive results for lymphomas and leukemias, just because those kind of neoplasias were observed after 104 weeks of age. So to have really to spare really animals, we have to use them like they was humans, to reproduce a human population.
Yeah, it's not exactly what you're saying, but what I'm saying is that what you're trying to do is take everything to the stage where, to the end point where we want them defined for safety. Yes, so therefore, have you invited OECD to come in and work with you so you can actually redefine their standards?
This could be a dream to me.
Yeah.
Yes, I would like very much to have a confrontation, and I have to say that I have already had. I was called 2-3 times in the European Commission to speak about new guidelines to expose degenerative risk for degenerative diseases or endocrine disruptive effects.
So OECD have not responded to your requests?
We have not had formal contact, but just audition. Is that there?
Я надеюсь, что после этой пресс-конференции обратятся. Я повторю для вас. Может быть, они обратятся.
Mine's Sean Porter from the Daily Mail. The industry say that the American families produce trillions of these meals, GM meals for 10 years, no evidence of any harm, and therefore no further testing experiments are necessary. So I what some of the things about that reassurance from the industry that people in the States have been eating these products for more than a decade without any evidence.
I really didn't understand very well.
So what he said was that the position of industry in the United States is that billions of pounds of these foods have been consumed and chemicals have been ingested and there's no harm. And I would counter that by saying that the incidence of all kinds, or just about all kinds of non-communicable diseases, chronic diseases, is on the rise over the last 25 years. So perhaps it's a coincidence that we have a lot of chemicals in the environment that weren't there. We have GM foods that weren't there before. Maybe that's a coincidence. Maybe that's not a coincidence. It's studies like this that will help to disentangle public relations from science. So the answer is we don't know. And for example, with the particular GMOs that we're talking about, the studies for safety that have been relied on by the regulatory agencies were done by the company who sells the product. For me, that's a fundamental conflict of interest that needs to be addressed. So to have a study funded not by the organization that stands to make money by the results of the studies, I think is a good thing.
Я хотела бы добавить, что 10 лет это очень слабо сопоставимо с продолжительностью человеческой жизни. Это практически детский возраст. И все. Поэтому те эффекты, которые могут... То есть поколение, которое выросло на этих геномодифицированных продуктах, дети, они еще даже не достигли половой зрелости. Они еще не способны к размножению. Пока оценить, по крайней мере, влияние на репродуктивную функцию невозможно в человеческом эксперименте.
Вы знаете, я очень хочу добавить, что когда мы говорим, что у американцев все нормально, или у всего мира все нормально, а весь мир уже сегодня ест продукты с ГМО, то, может быть, мы слишком оптимистичны. Когда вы говорите, что нормально, вы учитываете количество больных ожирением, вы понимаете, что, к сожалению, диабет становится все моложе и моложе, и дети уже болеют диабетом. Мы видим, какое количество онкологических больных. Когда ты говоришь, что нормально, может быть, у тебя никто в семье не умер от рака. У меня 5 лет назад умер отец от рака. Я не знаю, почему это произошло. И я считаю, что нормально – это не та оценка, которую мы сегодня должны давать. Поэтому, если есть хоть один шанс, что происходит какая-то ошибка, мы вместе ее должны исправить. Я очень хочу обратить внимание всех присутствующих и всех, кто нас сейчас смотрит по прямой трансляции, это не анти-ГМО эксперимент. Никто не выступаем против ГМО. Мы говорим о том, что огромное количество споров происходит в мире. И если есть хоть одна истинная причина не доверять этой технологии, то мы должны понять. Возможно, окажется, что технология безупречна. И тогда мы вместе с вами поаплодируем транснациональным компаниям. Но мы должны с вами включать здравый смысл. Коллега хочет задать вопрос. Микрофон.
Can I have a question? I've got the microphone. Hi. Professor Hugh Jones, molecular geneticist at Rothamsted Research in the UK. You framed the experiment to address the question, are GMOs safe or not? The big topic of the report. Well, of course, it can't ever do that. There's more differences between individual GMOs than there are between any one GMO and its conventional counterpart. All risk assessment is done on a case-by-case, gene-by-gene basis. So are you proposing to repeat this experiment for every GM event that's commercialized?
So, вы абсолютно правы. Вы абсолютно правы. Но для того, чтобы проверить каждую линию, нужно порядка 25 миллионов. Давайте начнем с чего-то одного.
No, it's just that because a lot of time during my life of investigator, I found this kind of question. So the problem is so big that we can resolve surely all of it, and so we don't face. It's better not to face because it's too difficult. No, I think that this time we will study something, and we know better what happened with the maize, but also what happened with some kind of pesticide that we don't know at all in their whole possible activity. And we start with that, and we will have some idea about one of the GMO. It's true. The whole project is enormous, but we have to start with something. And also this could represent a model in order to study other kind of products. Because I think that is demagogic to stay seated and look to everything so enormous for the strength of the new technologies. We cannot run so quick to know everything about before having them in the market. This happens every day. So we have to start. Is I think an oblige of science to have new technology, but also to know what are the risks for the human population about them. So to be afraid of the problem is not a solution, I think.
So you haven't identified the event yet, but let's assume it's a currently commercialized HT event, which has already undergone a lot of risk assessment. Why not choose a non-GM herbicide tolerant plant that is untested but also commercialized? This would seem to be a far more, if your task is to keep us safe, then why not choose something that's had no safety assessment until now?
As regard my specific position, this derived from a call from the European Commission. Last year, in September, I participated to the call with a project of my laboratory, and I entered for the first time in the world of GMOs. Because, as you know, Italy is very cautious about, we have to defend our good pasta, and so we are cautious about GMOs. But anyway, entering this world, I understood it was something of enormous, really enormous. And the choice about this specific issue derived from the interest that Europe had on it. because you know that in few years we possibly will have such a kind of maize introduced in Europe. So will be a good thing to know something about when we will have a decision.
Hi, my name is Kevin Coleman. I'm from the Genetic Engineering Network. I'd like to ask a question, reference your planned 3-year research in light of the government's current precautionary principle GMO consultation process. It would seem to me, from all the evidence that our Parliament is pushing forward, that we are likely to be growing GMO crops next year, or at the very least the year after. So how is your research going to prevent a contamination event which will inevitably occur from the growing of GMO crops amongst standard non-GMO crops?
So is your question, why should we undertake the research if the crops will be introduced anyway?
No, it's how can we actually, if you like, you've got your research you want to do, how can we, on the activist front, get this message across to the government to actually stall the introduction of GMO crops, which is what they're planning to do, so that this research that you're doing can actually fulfill its purpose and produce the results which will prove one way or the other the safety or the non-safety of GMO crops. What can we do to help you, if you like, to do your research so that we can then have a clean environment here if it proves that it's toxic?
Вы знаете, я боюсь, что это вопрос не к нам, а это вопрос к тем политикам, за которых вы голосуете. Это вопрос к любому человеку, который может выйти на улицу и протестовать, если он против, или если он за. Мы можем отвечать только за тот эксперимент, который мы организовываем. И я вот действительно немножечко переживаю, ответила ли я достаточно на вопрос о финансировании, поэтому я для коллеги специально сейчас хотела бы сказать о финансировании. Так вот, большая часть денег на наш эксперимент уже собрана. Мы почти полностью готовы к старту. У нас готов дизайн эксперимента. У нас собрана большая часть денег. Фамилии спонсоров будут раскрыты сразу после того, когда мы соберем всю сумму. Но у вас у всех написано в пресс-релизе, что мы не принимаем деньги у тех компаний, которые работают в биотехнологической области или в химической области. Я надеюсь, что этот вопрос удовлетворил.
Hello, could I ask a question, please? Well, there are some long-time campaigners against this issue in the room, and my own personal feeling here is that this is about 20 years too late. However, it's a positive, definitely, and something that we ought to work towards and give it our help, certainly. However, politically, Russia seems to have, over the last few months, year or two, has made a big stand against GM. And don't you think that this will be will go against it in terms of its authentication or its acceptance? The fact that Mr. Putin seems to be very anti-GM and Mr. Obama seems to be the opposite of it. So how does the panel think that that will be received?
Вы знаете, это очень смешной вопрос. То есть это вопрос, который поднимает настроение. Такое впечатление, как будто два мальчика поссорились. Может быть, этот эксперимент наоборот их примирит? Такой смешной пиар. Мы проводим эксперимент, чтобы Обама и Путин помирились, они узнают один ответ. Но на самом деле ситуация немножко не такая. Так получилось, что Россия выступает инициатором эксперимента. Но эксперимент будет проходить даже не только на территории России. Ученые из самых разных стран. Это не российский эксперимент, это международный эксперимент. И да, инициатором выступает НКО из России. И, кстати, мне не хочется говорить за Владимира Путина. Я думаю, что если бы он присутствовал здесь, он бы сам прекрасно ответил на этот вопрос. Но я хочу сказать, что он не выступает против ГМО. Он говорит о том, что мы должны узнать правду. Вообще у него похожая позиция на нашу. И он говорит, что Россия готова выполнять все свои обязательства в рамках ВТО. Речь идет о свободной торговле ГМО.
Maybe Rob instead would like to contribute, instead of building barbed wire around it with dogs and everything to present itself to the world, maybe they'll want to do something real about it.
Yeah, very good. Excellent suggestion. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Talk to you later.
Это ужасно. Я представляю себе, что сейчас напишут журналисты, которые здесь находятся.
Give them plenty to write about, that's what I would say.
Спасибо.
My next guest. My name's Ulrich Höring. I'm a long-retired molecular biologist. I'm glad that the discussion of two previous speakers have raised the issue of what actually is the experiment about and what are the controls, the control animals, how are they going to be treated? It implicitly raised both of those. Wonder whether I can make a comment on both of them. The question of what is a healthy diet for rats is how you design your control. And it could well be that standard laboratory rat chow is already poisonous, and that the control has to be, I don't know, wilderness and organic farms or something completely different. So I want at least the question addressed. What is the control? But much more difficult to address is what is the experiment? Because as was pointed out, there's not necessarily much in common between different sorts of genetically engineered crop plants. The one thing they have in common is that they have inserted into them at random, with the current technologies, at random, a gene that has been deprived of its other unknown properties. They're taking out the intervening sequences and so on. It's had added to it a powerful promoter to make it function. The whole process works. And we're assuming that that evidence that it works means that the science is right. Actually, we need to define what is the experiment. I don't mind much what it is. I'm looking forward to seeing it. But I do think we need to know what it is we're actually looking at.
So, specifically on the composition of the diet, that is the crucial point for this experiment.
Well, it's not just the composition, but why pick a GMO? There are lots of things you could do it with Roundup alone, without a pesticide. The choice is...
Because the project is an integrated project, we would like to look what happened when glyphosate is in the diet within the genetically modified maize, and what happened when it is alone for comparative results. This is usually the protocol that is requested for this kind of study. But you are right, it's very difficult to reproduce correctly the quantity because the historical diet of the rat, the one which lead to the historical control data, is also present in the diet in different quantity because in part is substituted by the maize, the GMO maize. So we calculated all that, and we will have also an isogenic maize control. So the maize of the diet will be the same without any modification. And in this case, we will have the comparison between a certain concentration of the GMO maize, the same concentration of the same maize isogenic, and the historical diet. So we will see if there are modifications that is reproducing more or less what happened to humans.
If that is well done, then you will arrive, if you find an effect, you will arrive at the point that Semelini has found, that there is, that there is a difference between a GMO and its isogenic control. And that would be a very valuable biological finding, apart from being important commercial, of course. So yes, that's fine, but that's huge. But you can't launch a big program of testing GMOs if, without defining which GMO you're going to test. I mean, I would give a lot of money to seeing it done if I could, but I would want to know what is being tested.
So why you say that we have not decided what kind of GMO? We have decided.
Yes, and then I'd like to know.
We have decided what is. So we have a precise study.
They talk about it.
Yes, we talk about that. It's a glyphosate resistant maize with the substitution.
One of them,
yes.
And it's Roundup resistant, not necessarily, and glyphosate is what we think of as the active principle.
Yes.
But it's
So
important to
the active principle and the compound as a whole.
Roundup is what is used in practice. It's silly to use glyphosate alone.
Yes. Yes, but what I didn't really understand what you mean at the beginning, what we have to study. If you have proposal about what should be done, please, you can write to us.
Yes,
I will be,
okay.
I will be pleased to discuss with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
I, as an organic farmer, absolutely welcome this initiative. It's a fantastically good initiative. And anybody here who's a scientist must hold up this as being a worthwhile thing to do. There's just been so much uncertainty over all the testing that's been done, amazingly, mostly by the companies themselves. There's just so much uncertainty for consumers. There's so much uncertainty over the fact that this stuff contaminates. In America, the contamination problem is huge. It's a wonderful initiative. And, you know, Rothamsted should be right behind you, as other people here who want real science. The idea that because sort of 3 billion or 30 billion meals have been served in America and nobody has suffered from it, very good answer you gave, which of course we've seen chronic diseases rising in America. But the idea that that is science is really laughable. Really laughable. And this is what we need to get over. This is an incredibly important initiative. Thank you very much indeed. You have my full support, and I'll be definitely making a contribution.
You identify yourselves.
In the industry.
What do I do?
Hi, Elaine.
Спасибо за слова поддержки.
Elena, I think you just said that, I think you said that it was the project was initiated in Russia, so excuse my ignorance. Is any of the project funded by the Russian state or Russian state-funded organizations? Can you just clarify that?
Хороший вопрос. Нет, на сегодняшний день государственных денег в проекте нет.
My name is Billy Garstang. I'm an activist and I represent GM3 Somerset. I'd like to, I'm not being facetious by asking you this, you obviously know what happened to Professor Seralini's work, done secretly over 2 years. I assume, but you can answer me, have you been in touch with Professor Seralini? And will you also, if you like, film this experiment? Will it be open once it's complete, so that you can imagine how suspicious we are because of 16 years of campaigning and we just don't appear to get anywhere. If this is going to work, it needs to be open for us to look and you know, once you complete it, decide for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you to you for this question, which is really very important because a lot of people ask for that to me. What do you think about the study of Professor Seralini? Professor Seralini's study had a huge merit, the one to raise the problem, because before that there were more uncertainty about possible risk. And from the beginning, I was asked to express my opinion about, and being myself in cancer research from 35 years, unfortunately, I could be younger. It is 35 years that I am in the field of carcinogenicity biopsy. I have to say that there were an inadequacy in the study. So the study was not adequate for the endpoints that were posed in the case of the study. The number of animals was very few. The presentation of data was not really correct, nor in terms of numbers, because I evaluated all pathologies description, and I have seen that sometimes they were collected in a unique issue, but there were different pathologies. And also, I have to say that in the first publication, the photograph of animals could be also spared, stay out of the publication. This because this kind of rats suffer of benign tumors, as a high incidence of benign tumors, which became very large and is not unusual to observe such kind of tumors. So, also if I have to say that this study tried to expose problem and succeeded in this, was inadequate for measures that involve such an amount of people and of money and of industry and everything, because I don't believe that industry is always bad. There are innovation, there are industry innovation that could be useful for humanity. I am not blind about that. So I think that we should be honest in exposing all the risk linked to GMO, if they are, but with an adequate model, not with few animals and evaluation not so strictly scientific. So this is my opinion. I please respect this is just my opinion. But in our study, we will try not to have the same error that unfortunately Professor Seralini did at the time.
Hello, Claire Peters from the Sustainable Food Trust. I just wondered if you could give any more information about the process that you've gone through to select scientists You've gone sort of to lengths to explain to us that you hope that the study will be acceptable to both those who are on the anti-GM side and the pro-GM side. How do you know that? Can you tell us any more about that?
Thank you very much.
I want to know what was the selection process for the scientists?
The selection process?
Process, yes.
You mean?
Selection process for us, or for the ones who execute.
Specifically, why you believe that this study over and above any other will be more acceptable to the size of the argument? That's kind of specific.
Я начну. Мы, наверное, не совсем точно и корректно донесли информацию. Ученые, которые здесь присутствуют, они являются членами наблюдательного совета. Они не проводят сами эксперименты. Имена ученых, работающих в научной группе, они засекречены. Место эксперимента засекречено. Ровно для того, чтобы никто не мог влиять никаким образом на результаты. Люди, которые присутствуют здесь, они обеспечивают в том числе и выбор ученых, но самое главное — наблюдение за тем, чтобы эксперимент был по-настоящему независимым. Они влияют на протокол, на выбор ученых.
Я хотела бы добавить, что если в процессе самого эксперимента появится необходимость в привлечении дополнительных ученых в наблюдательный совет, в каких-то, может быть, в неких узких областях, то это будет сделано. Но, естественно, это будет зависеть от тех промежуточных результатов, которые мы будем получать в процессе эксперимента. Потому что, вот это тоже мы не озвучили, но состояние животных будет оцениваться не только в конце эксперимента, но и на определенных промежуточных этапах развития, так скажем, либо интоксикационного процесса, либо независимо на протяжении их жизни, так скажем. И это позволит нам понять, кого еще из ученых нужно привлечь в наблюдательный совет. И еще одну вещь, которую я хотела бы осветить, наверное, судя по вопросам, я не очень четко это произнесла, что, по сути дела, эксперимент будет состоять из двух частей. То есть первая часть эксперимента – это когда будет исследоваться ГМО кукуруза, выращенная устойчивая к раундапу, содержащая соответствующее количество раундапа, изогенетическая кукуруза, которая также выращена с раундапом. И, естественно, будет чистый контроль абсолютно. И вторая часть эксперимента, когда будет исследоваться определенное количество раундапа, в тех количествах, которые мы, собственно говоря, с вами постоянно получаем в том случае, если мы едим вот эту устойчивую к раундапу кукурузу.
Hi, I'm Peter Melchett. I'm from the Soil Association, the organic organisation here in the UK. I'd like, first of all, to say, like others, it's regrettable some secrecy is necessary, but anyone who doubts the possibility of scientists coming under pressure should remember that in the UK some years ago, a scientist on a government advisory committee on GM who was arguing about scientific concerns about GM was threatened that he would receive no further money from the European Union unless he shut up. So the idea that scientists who are doing this work might not be subject to pressure is ridiculous, and we know that in this country. But having said that some secrecy is regrettable, I think nobody has said yet how welcome it is that you have announced this study in advance. This is really good scientific practice, almost never done in any field of science, where people will say in advance what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, and then wait and do the experiment. And it's been long argued, for example, in medical research, that this should be a legal requirement. None of the GM companies have ever announced in advance a study they're going to do of this sort, so that people can see what they're going to do before they do it. And it's ridiculous that nobody around in this room said, this is a very, very good progressive thing you're doing, making an announcement in advance. If I may, I'd make two other quick points. Yes, you're only looking at one GMO event. Many people have argued that all GMO events have inherent uncertainty, and it may have a generic application. If you find problems, it will certainly suggest, as the gentleman at the back said, that all GMO crops should be investigated in this way. If you find no problems, it will suggest that that's not necessary. But you're also going to look at Roundup or glyphosate separately, and that's a problem outside GM. It is now the most commonly found pesticide in the food we eat in this country, in our bread, because it's sprayed just before harvest on all of our cereal crops, on our wheat and barley. So just that bit of the work you're doing is really important from a food safety and human health point of view. And I also wanted to welcome the fact we're looking at endocrine disruption, which I don't think has been studied in previous work like ceremonies. And it's important, and I hope you will do this, and I hope my colleagues from the press will remember, this is not just a cancer study. You're looking at endocrine disruption for the first time, and toxicological impact, which Sherilyn did find. And the toxicological impact should not be dismissed just because they're not cancerous. That's ridiculous. So I really welcome the study. Many of us have been arguing since about 1995, if not earlier, that this sort of study should be done. It's been a scientific fraud that no studies of this sort have been done in the past. Very well. Thank you.
Огромное спасибо за слова поддержки. И вы совершенно фантастически сформулировали. Действительно, можно сохранить, уберечь ученых от давления, только сохранив их имена в тайне. И, к сожалению, это реалии сегодняшнего дня. На ученых не должны давить ни анти-ГМО-активисты, ни про-ГМО-корпорации. Ученые должны спокойно работать и приблизить человечество к истине. Это наша задача. Спасибо вам.
Hello, my name is Helena Paul from EcoNexus. I just wanted to ask you about the fact that physicians in certain towns in Argentina have been looking at the human impacts of GMOs and of Roundup sprayed from the air for many years. And their work has been much neglected for many of the same reasons as the desire to look at these issues here has been neglected. And of course the impacts on the land and the people, the biodiversity in that region is also tremendous. I know you're not looking at that, but I did wonder if you were thinking of looking at any of the toxicological studies, or at least exchanging information with some of the people who have been looking at the impacts on populations of those towns, which they call crop spray towns. Thanks.
So that's an excellent point. I can tell you that one of the reasons that I considered becoming involved in this study is the Argentine scientist Andres Carrasco, who published an important paper about the effects of glyphosate on bird development, was a dear friend of mine.
Margaret Hart from the House of Lords. I've been interested in glyphosate for some 20 years after I killed over the field that was sprayed with it. And I'm interested to know what formulation.
Please, higher voice, please.
I would be interested to know what formulation. what formulation of Roundup you'll be using, because I know there are some 300 different formulations in the UK alone, and some of them contain, if they're not very net ingredients, POEA, which we know is toxic. So how are you going to sort out which glyphosate you use, or are you going to use a range of glyphosate products?
That's an excellent question. I myself don't know which one will be used, but the understanding is that the same chemical that's sprayed on the crop will be tested by adding to the food and water. And to address the point that was made here earlier, of course we know that glyphosate itself is not the same thing as the commercial formulation of Roundup, so that's why both are being tested. So if you see an effect with one and not the other, then you can make certain inferences about causation. So if you find an effect with glyphosate, and you find it also with the formulation, or you find it in the formulation but not with the glyphosate, you can make some inferences about what might have caused that. But that's an excellent point. More than 300 formulations, which one do you pick? I'm glad I'm not the one picking that.
Hi, my name is Pam Larry, and I'm here from the United States in support of this new study, but also another wonderful announcement that will be made tomorrow. I am a GE activist on the ground in California, and my first question is, since this is a test that's going to be impacting the globe, and we know that basically any study that comes out that shows harm is immediately attacked, vilified, and discredited, particularly in the United States. Is the team going to be working on a PR campaign and developing a way to combat this? I have another short question depending on your answer.
Как раз насчет пиар-компании. Нам, наверное, понадобится и помощь, и поддержка, потому что мы ее еще недостаточно продумали. Наша главная пиар-компания – абсолютная открытость результатов и абсолютная независимость эксперимента. Безусловно, общественные организации и ученым очень тяжело будет противостоять тем, кто, возможно, захочет дискредитировать эксперимент. Поэтому здесь мы можем делать все вместе, поэтому все, кто захочет помогать нашему эксперименту, мы для всех открыты. И для этого в том числе сейчас проходит наша пресс-конференция. Все, у кого есть идеи, все, у кого есть вопросы, мы фактически на связи 24 часа в сутки, обращайтесь.
I agree, we appreciate any help. Anyway, as you know, we are very, we are experts in discredit against us. So I think that we have really to fight that with good science. There is not another way. So if you produce good data, good science, if you can prove scientifically that what you observed, science is science, and mathematics help a lot about science because usually the results are numbered, so there is not so much discussion. Also, if there is a lot of people who try to discuss also numbers. Anyway, I think that the help of people, the solidaristic effect about this study could help a lot because we survived after the aspartame history, for example, just because people trusted in the Ramazzini Institute. So also if the EFSA is not yet decided about that, you see a lot of product where no aspartame is very well specified, and this means that industry knows very well that citizens believe in our results. So independency and good results are the guarantee about the the good fight against discredit.
Well, you know, it's lovely to be in a continent where people still believe that. Because I can tell you firsthand from the United States that the truth doesn't really matter. It depends on how much what the media says and how often it's repeated, which is also very much supported by the same industries that are opposed to or that are promoting GE. So a quick follow-up question would be, has the study considered approaching the biotech industry in the United States for funding without any strings attached? Because I believe that that would be a very powerful PR tool. If they refused, then you could use that as a PR tool. And if they were participating, then they could not refute any of the findings that were discovered. So, and so that the more important question is if you have not considered it, why not? And why would you not do that? What would be the fears?
Это прекрасная идея. На самом деле у нас до сих пор была политика ни в коем случае не брать деньги у заинтересованных компаний. Но мы, наверное, сейчас подумаем о том, как эту идею можно использовать. В любом случае, никто не сможет влиять на результаты эксперимента. Ты становишься спонсором, но ты все равно не можешь влиять на результаты. Поэтому здесь, конечно, есть рациональное зерно, здесь хорошая мысль. Мы подумаем, как это можно использовать. Но никто, ни правительство, ни частные лица, ни юридические лица, те, кто выделяет средства на этот эксперимент, не смогут влиять на результаты в любом случае. Так что спасибо за хорошую идею.
Hello, I didn't identify myself previously. My name is Jim McNulty and I'm with the Genetic Engineering Network. I'd like to also just raise a subject. I was wondering if the seeds that would be used would be neonicotinoid in origin, treated, because as far as I know, all of the American seeds are neonicotinoid and treated, and so it needs to be one of the classifications, I think, in the test.
We discussed this extensively, and the seeds will not be neonicotinoid treated. That's my understanding.
Well, maybe you ought to reconsider that.
No, you're right. No, you're right. No treatment.
Yeah, it's the confounding effect.
Yeah.
I missed the beginning, so I didn't cover this, but how did you get permission? Did you have to get permission to test the seeds?
Sorry, we
Did you
don't
need
have
permission from Monsanto to test the seeds?
Нам нет.
No.
Потому что мы — это каждый из вас. Мы — это я, это конкретно вы. Это каждый сидящий в зале. И ни вам, ни мне не нужно разрешение на то, чтобы узнать правду. Я уверена, что Монсанто с этим согласится на все 100%. Во всяком случае, мне не нужно разрешение от Монсанто, чтобы верить в Бога.
Are you sure about that?
There are IP protected.
Монсанто не дает разрешения на проверку. Я думаю, что если медиа, которые здесь присутствуют, смогут этот вопрос озвучить и помочь нам получить разрешение у Монсанто, то это будет прекрасно. Если активисты, которые здесь присутствуют, напишут свои письма в компанию Монсанто с просьбой разрешить независимым ученым тестировать их семена, это будет прекрасно. Если это будут миллионы писем, это будет абсолютно прекрасно. Я хорошо понимаю ваш вопрос.
Can you publish without their permission?
Вы знаете, юристы, которые работают с нами, считают, что мы имеем право публиковать результаты. Это слишком большой эксперимент, чтобы мы не работали с юристами. И ГМО, и глифосат, которые мы проверим, и те данные, которые мы получим, мы должны знать, как это все влияет на человека или не влияет. Поэтому мы работаем с юристами и думаем, что проблем не будет.
Margaret again. First of all, I forgot to align myself with the two Peters and their congratulations to you. I think you're a very worthwhile organisation. Bring on Monsanto. I think if we challenge them, or if you challenge them, by using their seeds, and they complain about it, then we all hold me to that news, because this is such a good experiment, series of experiments. And as somebody has said, sitting quite near me, they wouldn't dare. So let's just see what happens.
Я хочу поблагодарить графиню Мар за то, что она присутствует сегодня здесь, и за ее прекрасное чувство юмора.
I would just like to ask you, I mean, yeah, well done. But I'd just like to ask you, it's almost as though you're going to create a different sort of world of, because the papers are owned, the papers are controlled, the television, the radio, everything is controlled, even in this country, or especially in this country. So how do you think that when you've done all this amazing work, and you prove one way or t'other, maybe if it's proved that it's safe, then you'll get the backing of Monsanto, Syngenta, or whatever. But if we could assume that maybe it won't be, then how the hell do you think you're going to get this out in a really forceful way to convince us that what's good for the world? Because in this country, the press has done such an amazing job to convince the public that GMOs are absolutely safe. And anyone who argues against it is depriving food from starving people in the world. It tells the lies about the yields and the pesticide use, etc., etc. So good luck to you, that's all I can say.
Thank you. Но много людей, много разных мнений. Кто-то считает, что это безопасно, кто-то считает, что это опасно. В зависимости от того, какие мы получим результаты, мы сделаем вообще все возможное для того, чтобы их донести до каждого человека, живущего на Земле. Если вдруг окажется, что ГМО это безопасно, мы скажем это. Если окажется, что ГМО опасно, мы скажем это. Я вижу, что сегодня миллионы людей выходят по всему миру, протестуя против технологий и считают, что это небезопасно.
Самым лучшим доказательством безопасной или небезопасной и какой-то обоснованностью полученных результатов будет именно служить вот эта вот такая полномасштабность этого исследования, обеспечение вот безупречной репутации с точки зрения отсутствия давления на эти результаты и использование группы ученых, мнений, опыта ученых, которые проводили уже аналогичные полномасштабные исследования и адекватная статистическая обработка данных. Все это в комплексе позволит, на мой взгляд, доказать обществу, людям, правительству о том, что вот это все-таки опасно или безопасно.
Насчет медиа я могу вам сказать так. Не знаю, во всяком случае у нас остается интернет.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Arnaud Apotheker. I'm an advisor to the Greens group in the European Parliament. I also want to join all the others who have implemented or commended the work you are doing, which I think may be very important. I've been working on GMO issues for 20 years, so I'm not so optimistic, I would say, about how to communicate about problems with GMOs in the society we are. And I have two questions on different levels. One, maybe I haven't understood, English is not my mother tongue, but I didn't understand whether you would buy seeds and grow the maize and then use this maize you have grown to feed animals, or whether you would buy the harvest itself. And in any case, I still haven't understood how you will buy GMO seeds, which are, I would say, isogenic in enough amounts from companies who don't want to sell them because they will sell them only to farmers who have a contract with them. So I think it is not a benign issue, the way of how you will have reliable seeds to make your experiment. And I think it is something important to think beforehand, because I know industry will use whatever failure, whatever crack in all of your work to go inside it. The second question is also related to that, is how you avoid being attacked if you find GMOs are a problem, how you will be able to answer to attacks from the industry, as industry has attacked all other studies who are not beneficial to them. And one of the options, to my mind, I don't know how realistic it is, there is a lot of work to be done on the methodology of the different studies. And I would personally think that this methodology itself must be debated before you begin the experiment, involving, whether directly or indirectly, also the pro-GMO establishment, to make sure before the experiment is done that you are not going to be attacked on the methodology itself.
Я только ту часть, которая касается организации процесса. У нас очень много действительно пока тайного. Но, как сказал коллега, это, конечно, необходимо для того, чтобы избежать давления на ученых. Вот, например, даже если меня поймать, взять в плен и начать пытать, я не смогу рассказать, назвать всю научную группу и сказать, кто будет работать, потому что даже я этого не знаю. И это очень важно. Поэтому, конечно же, мы сейчас вам не скажем, где мы возьмем эти семена. Я вам могу сказать, что мы сделаем и так. Мы купим и семена, и готовую кукурузу. А насчет того, может быть, методологию нужно заранее опубликовать, мне сложно сказать. Мы как раз можем сейчас вместе с вами узнать. Это решает наш наблюдательный совет. Ну, это такая новая идея, нам ее, наверное, надо будет как-то обсудить сейчас. Что вы скажете, коллеги?
So I'd say with respect to debating the methodology, that's been done in OECD already, right? So there are guidelines for how such studies should be done, and that's why we will rely on those to the extent possible. And if you have any familiarity with how that process was done, it took many, many years. So if we were to debate the methodology that we're to use here, probably the study would start in 2030 or later, and that wouldn't be beneficial.
If I may follow up on that, though, the issue of OECD protocols and so on are very clear. But actually, if you look at a number of published papers, quite a significant number depart from the published protocols in the actual carrying out of the research, and certainly in terms of published papers in the presentation of the research results. And I think this is this question about these departures goes to the heart of the question about transparency, which other people mentioned. I would like to add my congratulations to you and commend you for talking about this study ahead of its launch and about the objectives and what you're trying to do. I think that this should be a requirement of all research work in this area. We in this country and in the EU generally are bedeviled by this lack of transparency and secrecy. Our Biological Research Council makes funds to institutions like Rothamsted and John Innes Centre without any public debate, or without any discussion about the objectives, the value, the requirements and the needs, or about the methodology, and very little reporting about how those research projects develop and change throughout the project. Similarly, the EU, major EU programme called the Amiga programme on potatoes, impossible to get any information ahead of, other than a rather bland website declaration. When you ask questions about methodologies, when you ask questions about the rollout of the study, when you ask questions about who holds the patents, you get no response. So I think it's very good that you're doing this, and you're also honest about where there's questions to be answered. I think it would be, given that many people believe that these health assessments are critical, I am very disappointed that one can already see criticisms from the research establishment in our country from BBSRC, and it has to be said from representatives here today from Rothamsted, already carping about the study. Now, if we're talking about really open and transparent science, which, you know, we are meant to have this open and transparent society, is it not possible for researchers funded by the EU and researchers at places like Rothamsted and John Innes Centre, who after all are taxpayer funded, to actually join in this on a transparent basis, discuss with you the methodology, discuss with you the rollout, be a steering group, work with you on the program, using taxpayer money, because they get that from us anyway, in a collaborative, open and transparent way. Is that something, a question to you would welcome at an EU and a UK level? And a question to Hugh over there, is this something that Rothamsted would welcome and be open to?
Я так думаю, что вы читаете мои мысли. Вообще вы озвучили мои мечты. Я задаю себе этот вопрос много лет. Почему это не происходит? Ну, у меня, конечно, есть ответ. Я догадываюсь, почему это не происходит. И эти ответы мне не нравятся. Поэтому, когда кто-то сказал, что мы создаем идеальный мир, может быть, мы пытаемся создать, если не идеальный мир, может быть, просто уменьшить количество того хаоса, который существует сегодня. Конечно же, если такой наблюдательный совет будет создан, дополнительный, да, если правительства захотят участвовать в этом, мы, конечно же, открыты. Вообще, главная мысль, которую мы хотим сказать сегодня, мы вообще полностью открыты. Welcome.
В отношении обсуждения методологии тестирования я хотела бы добавить следующую вещь. В связи с тем, что, как уже вначале говорилось, неоднократно подчеркивалось, разрабатываемый протокол полностью соответствует, и не только, вернее, полностью соответствует, но превосходит требования ОЭСа, кстати, в которых сказано, что это минимальные требования, которые должны быть соблюдены, а каждый исследователь имеет право вносить определенные модификации, если они научно обоснованы. Так вот, для того, чтобы получить эту научную обоснованность внесенных изменений и дополнений, на самом деле этот протокол проходил научное, так скажем, лицензирование и рассмотрение среди очень большой группы ученых и специалистов, и вот их имена как раз держатся в секрете. То есть это будут непосредственные исследователи. И только после этого согласования уже мы, как вот наблюдательный совет, так сказать, тщательно обсудили этот протокол, внесли еще кое-какие коррективы, на наш взгляд, необходимые, и только тогда вот мы, как бы рекомендуем, что по этому протоколу это исследование может быть запущено. А если мы начнем сейчас, правильно сказал Брюс, о том, что если мы сейчас еще будем в обществе обсуждать эту методологию исследований, весь протокол, то начнем действительно в 30-м году.
Professor Jones responds to the
Can we hear what Professor Jones?
Can Professor Jones respond to the question that was directed to him as well? You were asked if you're like to put your point forward as well. I haven't come here to answer questions, but I'm happy to. Do you want to?
Please.
There you go.
So we would clearly support well-conducted, hypothesis-driven science. Absolutely.
Great. That's good news.
And I have more faith in some of you in the audience that if the science that is well done and is conducted according to OECD guidelines shows that there are hazards with a particular event or a particular pesticide, then the public will understand that. Science has the loudest voice, and if it's well done and well conducted, I think the public will understand that.
Will you tell them? Will you tell them?
Well, I won't need to, because these guys will. The publication will tell them. Well, but to answer your question, I'm afraid the Institute hasn't got the expertise to support this kind of work. But there are other scientists in the UK, or lots of good scientists in the EU, that are toxicologists and have expertise in food testing.
If I may, I think that's a fair response, but with a large degree of disingenuity attached to it. I mean, the fact is that when the Seralini study came out, okay, accepting the limitations that were mentioned earlier about the carcinogenicity aspects of that study, in terms of toxicology, that study actually met all the criteria, all the scientific criteria. Yet scientists from Rothamsted and the John Innes Centre were trotted out by the Science Media Centre outside of their discipline on subjects that they had very little expertise about. Yet here, way outside of their discipline. Similarly, you talk about the scientific publication process. Actually, the scientific publication process is, in my view, relatively corrupt these days. It's not an open peer review process. It's subject to statistical mechanisms. It's subject to meta-analyses which actually confuse issues. It's not a clear and open, transparent process any longer.
Вы видите, что происходит? Уже сейчас наша пресс-конференция становится научной дискуссией. И правильно говорит Брюс, если это еще в масштабе общества начнет обсуждаться, это 30-й год, это очень оптимистичный прогноз. О профессоре Сералини я лично могу сказать так. Насколько я знаю, он не имеет отношения к этому исследованию, и он не принимал участие в подготовке протокола. Но, безусловно, все ученые, которые присутствуют, которые работают, они все знакомы с результатами его исследования, иначе это было бы непрофессионально, приступая к такому большому исследованию. Конечно же, они это изучили.
Henry Romans from Sustainable Pulse. I'd like to ask 3 questions which will clear up some questions that John Vidal asked earlier. One of them is, what exactly makes this better than previous studies, and how is it the largest ever study? What makes it the largest and most comprehensive? We need to understand exactly what makes it largest. Why, from the screen there, it says the world's largest ever study. So where's the logic behind it being the largest when you haven't announced exactly the RAP numbers? You've said in the thousands, which obviously makes it statistically important, but why is it the largest study?
I would like answering to you also answer to the previous discussion. I think that we are speaking about weight of evidence. Evidence alone is nothing. It's the weight of evidence which is important in an animal study in order to perform a realistic risk assessment. And so what we would like to produce with this study is the realistic weight of evidence of a negative or positive study in terms of developmental disease, carcinogenicity, or toxicity. So the weight of evidence is based on different parameters which are stated in all guidelines, in science, in all the laboratories which perform in vivo biopsy. So the result should be linked to biostatistic evidence, strengths of data, and all that is given by the number of animals, by the homogeneity and reproducibility of procedure, by the homogeneity in the evaluation of the different pathology. So it's not just a matter of performing the study, but to give it from the beginning the necessary weight of evidence when we are looking to the result. And what we think to have done to this project is the parameters which will allow us within 2-3 years to give evidence-based data on toxicology, if this exists, of GMO and the associated pesticides.
Is it the number of rats or the parameters that make it the largest study? That's my question.
The largest study is a need, because...
Are you it or not? I mean, we're just, you say you're being totally transparent. You say you design the study, and we're trying to get details out of you, and we're getting verbiage. We're not getting the detail, which allows us to assess whether this is serious or not. Please.
Don't be worried. Don't be worried.
I'm just trying to find out why it's the largest study. That's all. So is it number of rats, parameters? What are we talking about making it the largest study? Because it's important to discuss why it's larger than previous studies and how it's larger than previous studies.
Maybe it would be better said to be the most comprehensive study.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
but why the most comprehensive? How is it more comprehensive than previous studies?
Because in one large study, we're examining carcinogenicity at OECD plus, the toxicology at OECD plus, and the multi-generational and endocrine disruption. None of this has ever been done even singly before and published. Studies may have been done. I'm quite sure that companies have done internal studies, but the results of those studies are not available for anyone to look at. Right? So this is going to be published work, which will be available for scrutiny.
And one more question regarding the funding. You said that it will be announced that the funding will be made transparent when you reach the 25 million mark. But when do you expect that? What kind of time frame are we talking about? Are we talking about years, or are we talking about the next 6 months? When are we talking about?
У нас есть определенный план. Я думаю, что мы в следующем году, в начале следующего года, уже приступим к экспериментальной части.
Thank you. That was a very clear answer.
Well, sorry to take the microphone again, and it is, maybe I'm monomaniac, but it is still about a little bit the same and about the scientific credibility and the scientific attacks you will be probably submitted to when you want to put out your result. And I say it is not anecdotal, because even here, even with people we know, even with people we trust, I heard a lot of wrong things about Seralini study, for example. Somebody has said the number of rats were not enough. Somebody else has talked about cancerogenicity studies. In fact, the Seralini study was not about cancer, and it has followed the OECD guidelines, and still it has been very much attacked. I don't want to say the study was good or bad, I'm not a statistician, but it has been attacked for the number of rats, for the small samples, and it was following the OECD guidelines for toxicology, not for cancerology, and he never mentioned in his study any increase in cancer. So I'm a little bit, that's what I say. Your study may be also subject to the same wrong opinions, even though the things on paper look right.
У нас будет такое количество крыс, что невозможно будет делать нападки.
Tom Sheldon from the Science Media Centre. Can you tell us whether the raw data will be published in full at time of publication of the study? And also, you talked a lot about the methodology and the study design, but there still seems to be a bit of a disconnect, and Jeffrey's been asking about details of the study design. Will the study design and methodology be published, put into the public domain at the start of the experiment so it can be examined independently?
Кстати, насчет сайта. Прошу обратить внимание. Здесь выведена картинка веб-сайта нашего эксперимента. Он запущен сегодня ровно в 14 часов по лондонскому времени. И здесь будут все новости об эксперименте, все необходимое, что захочет сказать наш наблюдательный совет о методологии. Здесь будет вся информация о том, как помочь эксперименту. И здесь вообще будет абсолютно все. Тут даже есть режим комментариев. Вы можете оставлять комментарии, и это публично все будет. То есть Factor GMO, его сайт уже работает. Так что всю информацию, которую мы сможем сообщить вам, она у вас будет.
Хочу обратить внимание, то, что вся информация будет на 6 языках.
Не так, вся информация уже на 6 языках,
ну да.
А будет еще на большем количестве языков.
Italian, for example.
Buongiorno.
И, кстати, для нашего француза, там есть уже французский язык.
Can we just clarify the process? I presume the scientists that are actually going to do the experiments are going to publish, and then you're reviewing before going to peer review?
That's a good question. It's not been considered. I think my understanding was that my role is in study design. I'd be happy to look at papers, but I didn't realize that would be part of. Is that part of it?
I think that we will also look to the paper before publishing. Yes, this is normal because we have to look to the results and to understand if they are correct or not. So our position is as a guarantee.
So your position is pre-peer review?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
As a guarantee about, we are here as a guarantee about the conduct of the experiment for our own personal expertise. And so we got.
So you're acting like GMP?
Yes.
Sorry, I asked you about raw data as well. Can you just say something about that? Will the raw data be published at the end of the study?
Промежуточные результаты. Они, конечно же, будут.
It would be nice if you would ask that same question of the various other entities that have done such studies.
I'd like to thank you for this brilliant initiative. There will be a lot of support. There's a lot of concern around the world, as you know.
And I think in this country, in Europe, we have in this room some visionary journalists to whom we all owe a great debt for educating us on the whole GM issue. So thank you. You will know who you are. You're talking about prevention here, and one area that would be very interested in prevention is the private healthcare sector. It's in their interest that people don't get sick. And we've talked about rising chronic disease in the USA. There's a lot of rising chronic disease and autoimmune disorders in the UK, probably Europe, but I'm British, so I know about the UK. Diabetes alone costs the National Health Service in this country £1.5 million per hour. And that's one of probably 30 well-known chronic diseases. So there are big questions about whether GM foods and pesticides challenge the autoimmune responses, and if that isn't the great epidemic of the times we live in. So I represent Global Education Development Limited. I've done some sleuthing on my own about the availability of GM products in this country. People in the room may know about this, but I was quite shocked to find that although the EU directives for catering, particularly the catering industry, are very clearly posted on all the local authorities' websites in this country, apparently they're not monitored, and I followed up on some of these. And having gone to some of the suppliers too, it's not illegal to sell GM products in the UK, but it is illegal to make them available to the public without labelling. So what I found is that a large majority of the catering industry in this country is actually using GM oil on a daily basis. And it goes by price because it's the cheapest. I'm just giving you some information, which I don't know how aware anybody is. And I'd like some journalist who's an interested investigative journalist to look into the degree to which the UK is not supporting the laws against labelling GM foods being supplied to the public. People are eating in restaurants GM oil on a daily basis, thinking they are protected in the country.
Спасибо большое за обратную связь. Очень приятно видеть людей, которые неравнодушны. Я хочу сказать, что вы затронули самый главный вопрос, это проблема выбора. Она должна быть у всех нас. Во всяком случае, мы в России считаем, что в этом и есть суть демократии. Поэтому мы должны иметь право, какие продукты выбирать, какие исследования проводить. И для того, чтобы иметь право выбора, нужно знать правду. Именно поэтому мы все вместе сейчас постараемся узнать правду. И я думаю, что это главная задача нашего эксперимента. А во всем мире действительно очень часто нарушаются права и потребителей. И я думаю, что, конечно же, нам нужно бороться за наши права, потому что мы с вами, каждый из нас, мы в первую очередь, ну не в первую очередь, но мы в любом случае потребители. Поэтому спасибо за такую важную обратную связь. Наша пресс-конференция уже идет 2 часа. Я не считаю, что это пресс-конференция. Мне кажется, что это очень интересный диалог и обмен мнениями. Я не знаю, как вы, лично я получила огромное удовольствие от этого общения. Если есть еще последний вопрос, давайте его зададим. Хочет кто-то задать вопрос? Окей, есть. И будем заканчивать.
Hello, I'm Diana Reeves, and I'm here from the United States. As an individual who has traced my chronic health problems back to genetically engineered foods by way of a very meticulously careful elimination diet, I'd like to thank you all for supporting this research. I have a question for you about the choice of subjects for the study. One of the major criticisms in the United States of the Seralini study was the use of the Sprague Dolly rats. And I'd like to know what type of rat you're going to use and if you've addressed those concerns in terms of negative PR.
I am convinced that Sprague Dolly rat is one of the best models to study such a kind of compounds. And this is also confirmed by the fact that the National Toxicology Program switched from Fisher rat to Sprague Dolly rat because the kind of tumor by incidence in this type are more similar than in other strains. So there is no problem about the strain, but about other things.
That was a major criticism, so you will be.
It's actually very entertaining criticism because the studies that were done by Monsanto use Sprague Dolly rats.
Yes.
So to criticize someone else for using
Yes.
the same animal which they use to establish safety is preposterous, actually.
It is absolutely. That's what they do. Thank you.
Спасибо огромное, что вы сегодня были здесь с нами. Еще один вопрос.
It's not a question, it's a statement. Very short. I'd just like to point out to everyone that the environmental impact assessments have already been completed in this country, and they were negative in terms of all the things that were assessed. So, irrespective of the feeding study and what it's going to find, we already know that it has a very negative impact on the environment.
Друзья, спасибо вам огромное. Вы огромные, как бы наши союзники, задавая вопросы как острые и сложные, так и очень позитивные вопросы с поддержкой. Спасибо огромное за то, что вы сегодня были с нами. Может быть, это немножко исторический момент. Спасибо. Надя.
I would like, this is I will forget about our yes. So, would you like that to